Hi, I'm Rob Parker from Nuclear for Climate Australia. It's good to be with you today. Okay, so this is the third in a series of videos we're making dealing with how we correct the energy blunder as Australia tries to go to a clean, ultra-low carbon future. In our second video, we outlined how we needed 24.8 gigawatts of new nuclear. That consists of 17 large plants, 3 small plants located on the grid. And they'd be built by 2060 for a total cost of about $231 billion, inclusive of transmission. So now in this third video, we're going to look at how we marry that new nuclear with wind and solar to achieve an ultra-low carbon future. We needed a starting point. We picked that starting point as being the year 2030 and using the wind and solar resources that AEMO are telling us we're going to have on the grid by that time. So in this image, each coloured band represents a different type of generator. Down the bottom left, we see the black coal generators. Sitting above those, the brown coal generators in Victoria. Above those, in 2 tones of grey, we've got open cycle and combined cycle generated. On the right-hand side of those, we've got nuclear, and it comes in 2040. The coal exits around 2047. The gas exits around 2054. After that time, there is no further requirement for fossil fuel on the Australian grid if we use nuclear. Now, above all of those resources, in the bright yellow, we've got rooftop solar. Above that, we've got utility-grade solar. And above that again, we've got wind in light blue, followed by, in dark blue, our hydro. And then above that, we've got domestic batteries, utility batteries, and pump storage. It's really important to note how wide those bands are of wind and solar. That gives you some indication of why wind and solar is so expensive. They're cheap at the farm gate, but all that wiring up and all that social disruption and environmental disruption tells us what a huge task it is to actually put this stuff into the field. The small amount of nuclear we actually have requires a very small environmental footprint. Okay, so we'll move now to the next slide. And having looked at the resources that go in, this looks at the amount of energy that actually comes out of them. So on this image on the left-hand side, we start off in 2023-24 with a demand on the grid of about 212 terawatt hours per year. That rises as the population increases up to about 296, call it 300 terawatt hours per year in 2060. So that drives up our energy demand. Now, going along with that, we have a decreasing amount of carbon going into the systems. We're showing that in 2 types of lines. The solid red line represents what we call life cycle emissions. That includes the stuff we burn plus the embodied carbon in each of those generators. And the dotted line represents just the emissions that come out of burned fossil fuels. So what we see is on the top left, we're starting up at around 600 grams of carbon. More wind and solar gets built and running in parallel with the fossil fuel generators, we get down into the high 300 grams of carbon dioxide. But after 2040, when the nuclear comes in, we get a precipitous decline in our emissions with nuclear. And we get down, as you see on that dotted red line, to a true zero emissions on burned fossil fuels around about 2050. Life cycle emissions are still up around 68. If we had nuclear, it'd only be 6. But we get a lot of embodied emissions coming in from all of that stuff that's made in China and Korea. And so we still end up with about 68 grams of carbon, decreasing about 58 as we proceed year by year. So that gives us a tremendous indication of how we can actually achieve a low carbon emissions economy. But of course, a lot of people are complaining that nuclear is too slow and we've got to get on and have ultra low carbon, and they're telling us that can be achieved by wind and solar alone by 2050. That's in direct contradiction with what Bowen's telling us, what AEMO is telling us, and what CSI are telling us. They're saying that we need to have 15 gigawatts of gas, peaking gas, still sitting in there in about 2050. They rung up the white flag on an ultra-low carbon emissions future using wind and solar because they know we need so much gas backup. But with nuclear, we can actually achieve ultra-low emissions, and that's shown on this next image. Here we're comparing the future, not just 2050, but what we're going to get in the long run in terms of cumulative emissions. And we're comparing three scenarios here. So on the left-hand side, we've got emissions in terms of millions of tonnes of carbon dioxide, cumulative emissions. And along the bottom, we've got the years. And what we see in that gold colour, that's our nuclear scenario sitting on about 3.2 billion tonnes of carbon emitted by the year to 2120. That's about half of what you'll get if you try to persist with the AEMO's step change scenario. This is their most ambitious scheme. And we would still be about half that if we persisted with nuclear. So that's the real reason driving nuclear. And I hope you've got something out of this video, and we look forward to seeing you in video number 4.